or any large organization, at the end of the day, you are investing or making a bet in that leadership. Certainly, when you think about these large companies, like I just mentioned, you tend to think about the CEO in that organization. You tend to think about, Bill Gates or Zuckerberg or Bezos as the person you're investing in. And certainly, the CEO is really critical, but even more so is the overall leadership team at that organization, and their ability to grow as leaders, to develop leaders, retain leaders is going to be what determines the long-term profitability and success of that organization. That's what you're investing in at the end of the day. So yes, we here at DLP are making real estate investments, and yes, your investments are backed by real estate here, but at the end of the day, the real factor that's going to determine the type of yield we generate is going to determine if we exceed our return projections or fall short, is leadership. So people here who've invested with DLP for a long time or thinking about investing, tend to think of me as the leaders. I've been the face of DLP from the beginning, and still very much actively involved in each business and actively the front and center here at DLP. But I am far from the sole leader here. I'm far from the singular leader driving and pulling all the strings in the organization. In fact, we have 21 senior executives now at DLP. And we have a total of 60 people at DLP who have multiple team members reporting to them, who are part of our leadership team. And on the screen here are our 21 executives, from Bob Peterson as our Chief Financial Officer and a partner here at DLP Capital Partners, to Barry DeGroot, our Chief Legal Counsel and partner here at DLP, to Bob Kay, who's now President of Bright Homes, our newest business, Patrick, our Chief Experience Officer, Bill, our Chief Technology Officer. Then we have our individual business unit head executives, Nate, our President of Lending, Jason, our President of Real Estate Management, VPs, SVPs throughout the business units, Rich here as Managing Director at DLP Capital, and Larry as Head of Investor Relations. Newest executives we brought aboard here are Frank, who's head of our redevelopment, our construction on all of our multifamily communities. Dominique, who's our new Managing Director and Senior Counsel. And then Oren, who's the founder and partner with us in Bright Homes, joining us here over the last couple months. Stephen Tide overseeing loan servicing. We've really developed, many of these team members have developed from the entry level roles or middle management into our senior executives here at DLP. And some of the leaders I just mentioned had been developed leaders outside of DLP and were brought in as leaders, but are still very much so developing their ability and skills and growth as an elite world-class leader here at DLP. It's where we spend, again, a tremendous amount of not only my focus, but everybody here you see on the screen spend a tremendous amount of their focus at DLP. At DLP Capital Partners, you'll see a group of the leaders here specific to Capital Partners, including Rich and Larry, who I mentioned a moment ago. So that's a brief overview of the key leadership team here at DLP, but really how those key leaders operate and how they grow as leaders and how we are going to continue to build our we call our bench strength here at DLP. It starts with defining leadership. And at DLP, we spent a lot of time to really define what leadership is at DLP. And we've defined leadership as leadership is defined by results. Leadership is the capacity to influence others through inspiration and passion, generated by vision and ignited by a purpose and produced by conviction. It's a little bit of a long overview of leadership, but really feel that fully defines leadership. But if I were to simplify that down, leadership is influence, and that's what leadership is in its essence. But we've fully defined it in how we grow and think of leadership here at DLP. And we believe very strongly that leadership can not only increase our profitability here at DLP, but dramatically increase our returns to you as investors at DLP. And that's why we focus so much here in developing DLP's leadership, but also we spend a tremendous amount of time helping our borrowers that we lend to develop their leadership team, because we know that as they grow their leadership, their probability of performing on their investments, their ability to scale and grow, is going to be directly tied and correlated to their ability to develop leadership. At DLP, one of the best ways we've been able to measure our ability to grow our leadership has been through what we call PPP, which stands for productivity per person. And we take our net revenue divided by our cost of goods, which is our gross revenue minus cost of goods sold, divided by our number of team members. And that gives us our number, which we determined to be PPP. And we started this a couple years ago. And last year, in 2018, we grew by about 23%. We became 23% more productive per person. And that was a direct correlation to our growth in our leadership team. And so far this year, we have the same goal of, again, increasing our productivity by 28%, meaning we produce 28% more net revenue in one single year per every person at DLP. And this year at DLP, we've added 70 plus team members, and we've increased our PPP by $12,000 per person through the first half of the year, while adding 70 plus new team members, as directly correlated to our ability to grow leadership. How you grow and build great leadership is there's really only one way, and that's to become a better leader yourself. Our leaders, including myself, starting with myself, have to constantly grow and improve as a leader. Good leaders do not follow poor ones. People naturally will follow leaders stronger than themselves. Leadership development, again, must be at the center of any great organization. We've defined here at DLP the job of a leader, and we've defined that the job of any leader is to make things easy. And I could stop right there with the definition of the job of a leader. It's to make things easy. It's not to make things more complex. It's not to bring in really complicated procedures and details and add in really sophisticated ways of doing things. It's about making things easy for your team members so the team can execute. Leaders show the way through the forest and achieve the team's goals by teaching, coaching, and empowerment. Leaders develop leaders. And we focus really heavily on keeping our leaders focused on their job of leadership, which is to make things easy, to clear the path so their team can execute. We believe that leadership is so critical because building a deep bench of up-and-coming leaders provides us with improved performance and puts us in a better position as the organization continues to grow. Puts us in a better position that if we were to lose a leader for any reason, that we're going to be able to pick up the production of that leader and keep driving forward. At DLP, we have realized that all of our accomplishments to date and all of our goals moving forward revolve around our people. We focus here on a term we use a lot called RPRS, which stands for right people in the right seats. But we also refer to right people as rock stars or A players. And we define rock stars as team members who are nearly irreplaceable. Although focusing on building our leadership bench puts us in a position that we can replace rock star team members through the bench strength we have. Rock stars are people that would be very difficult and we wouldn't want to have to deal with replacing here because they're integral to our growth as we continue forward. Leadership and trust. A true test of elite world-class leadership is the ability to build and develop elite world-class leaders. It's much more difficult to lead leaders than it is to lead followers. For example, it's much easier for me to build an organization filled with minions who follow and do exactly what I tell them to do and just simply do the task in front of them. It's easy to lead followers. It is much more difficult to lead and develop leaders, to empower, teach, coach, and develop team members into leaders, to develop team members who don't just follow, but actually lead others. A great quote by John Maxwell, who's the father of leadership in my eyes: "A leader knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way." Leaders lead by example. They do what they tell others to do. They do more than they expect their reports to do. They do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, even when it is difficult. Leaders are reliable. You can count on them. You can know they're going to show up and, again, do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, even if it's difficult or they don't want to do it. Leadership progression is in order to develop elite world-class leadership, you need to find others around you who want to lead. Being a leader will put more pressure and responsibility on yourself. However, as you develop leaders, you will be able to share more and more responsibility while you delegate and elevate. Often when people start becoming better leaders, they deal with the challenge that more falls to them because everybody wants to turn their direction to that leader. They want to rely on that leader to tell them what to do and how to do it and when to do it. But the true test of building world-class leaders is to develop the leaders underneath a great leader so they can take on more responsibilities and allow leaders such as myself or other key top leaders to be able to delegate and elevate and focus on larger and bigger priorities as the organization continues to grow. Truly elite world-class leaders develop leaders who are able to solve their own problems and those of their teams, and in turn drive results and gain influence. Elite world-class leaders are incredibly disciplined. They build habits and rituals that free up their time, allowing them to focus on what really matters. They give up, and this is the definition of discipline. They give up what they want right this minute, the short-term pleasures, for what they really want, which is achievement and fulfillment. You know, if you have the personal goal of losing weight, you know, it's giving up that donut you really want right now for getting in the kind of shape that you really want to be in. That's what discipline is all about. And leaders in our organization and any great leaders exemplify leadership or exemplify discipline and show how to live a disciplined life, how to operate, focused on building habits and rituals that drive results. Elite world-class leaders develop leaders through accountability and ownership. Ownership for key projects, priorities, and expectations that are understandable to all. The leader inspects what they expect from their reports, and they hold their reports accountable to achieving their desired result or expectation. So they don't only clearly give out the accountability and the ownership to get things done, but they actually inspect that it gets done correctly, holding team members accountable and driving results. Leaders support fellow leaders, and this is a big thing we focus on at DLP is we know when you really focus and grow as a leader, you realize how hard it is. It's a major challenge. It's a major commitment. And elite world-class leaders support fellow leaders. They understand how difficult it is, and they show their support to fellow leaders verbally and through action, through participation, through involvement, through backing up the message of fellow leaders. You do not become an elite world-class leader and then simply stay at that level. It's not a one-time event or activity. It requires continuous effort and development. Each of your team members determines if you're an elite world-class leader based on your relationship with them. So you have to develop that leadership relationship with each person. It's a one-to-one relationship, not a one-to-many relationship. John Maxwell, in one of his very best book in my eyes is called The 5 Levels of Leadership. And again, if you haven't read any of John Maxwell's books, he is the forefather of leadership. And he's got many amazing books. One of my other favorites is The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. But The 5 Levels of Leadership is the best overview of leadership that I've come across. And I've read at least 100 to 200 leadership books. Probably over 200 actually, but at least, well over 100. And this is by far the best in my eyes. And he defines 5 levels of leadership and defines the first level of leadership as position. This is the lowest level, the entry level. You're looked to be a leader simply because you're in the position of leader. It requires no ability or effort. Anyone can be put into a leadership role. And it's people will only listen to you because they have to, because of your position. The next level of leadership is permission. This is based on relationships. At this level, people choose to follow you because they want to. In other words, they give you the permission to lead them. To grow at this level, leaders have to work to getting to know their people and connecting with them. You can't lead without people, which means you need to learn to like the people that report to you, that you work with, in order to lead well. You need to treat people as individuals, understand the value they bring, and help develop them through positive influence, which at the center of that is building trust. The third level of leadership is production. The best leaders know how to motivate their people to get things done. In order to get things done, they need to lead by example through production. On this level, leaders who produce results will build influence and credibility. So this is where people follow you as a leader because you've shown that you produce. They know that you get things done. They know that you get results, and they follow you because they know you're going to get the job done. And that if they follow your direction, they're going to get results. They're going to follow you because of your track record. Level 4 leadership is about people development. And this can be summed up as the term reproduction. This is where you're focused on developing as many leaders as you can by investing in them and helping them grow. When there's more leaders, the organization can get more done. It's very, very simple and obvious. But this is where it becomes very difficult to going from people following you as a leader to moving to where you're developing leaders. This involves investing in people, investing in them as a whole, not just in them professionally, but then them as a whole. I believe very strongly that in developing people, you must look at them as a full person, understanding their personal world, their personal life, understand their goals and ambitions and desires, not just related to work, but them as a whole, their family, faith, lifestyle, friends, understanding them as a whole, what's important to them, and helping them develop in all aspects of their life. And then the final level of leadership, which is very, very hard to achieve, takes a lot of focus, energy, and effort, is what John Maxwell calls the pinnacle. This is the highest level of leadership, which again is very challenging to obtain. It requires longevity as well as intentionality. You simply can't reach level 5 until you're willing to invest your life into the lives of others for the long haul. But if you stick with it, you'll continually focus on both growing yourself at every level and developing leaders who are willing and able to develop other leaders. You may find yourself at the pinnacle through that immense focus in developing yourself and developing leaders who are able to develop other leaders. That's the pinnacle where now we're at not only developing ourselves as a leader, developing people underneath us who report to us as leaders, and then they're developing leaders beneath them. That's when you have multiple layers of leadership within the organization. The commitment to becoming a pinnacle leader is sizable, but so are the payoffs. Level 5 leaders develop level 5 organizations. That's the top tier great organizations, the small percentage of organizations that maintain greatness over long periods of times. They create opportunities other leaders don't. They create a legacy in what they do. People follow them because of who they are and what they represent. In other words, their leadership gains a positive reputation as a result. They often transcend their position, their organization, and even sometimes their industry. And last comment on level 5 leadership is level 5 leaders are incredibly passionate. Leadership is not an exclusive club for those who are born with it. I'm going to play a quick little video that kind of describes that from Jim Collins. They're not people simply born with it. Some people think, oh, I'm not charismatic. I don't like being front and center. I can't be, a great leader. I don't have that kind of personality. When very many of the very best leaders in the world are introverts. The traits comprising the raw material of leaderships can be acquired. If you link those skills with desire, nothing can keep you from becoming a great leader. Some people certainly do have more of a natural, intuition or grasp, but developing influence, developing the skills of leadership can be developed, not discovered. This here is level 5 leadership and how Jim Collins, who I believe is the greatest mind in all of business, and he actually built this concept of level 5 leadership very much in conjunction with the thinking of John Maxwell. And the way he defines it is level 1 are highly capable individuals. Level 2 are contributing team members. Level 3 are competent managers. People who can organize people and resources towards achieving predetermined objectives. Level 4 are effective leaders. They catalyze commitment to and vigorous pursuit of a clear and compelling vision. And level 5 is the level 5, what he calls executive, who build enduring greatness through a paradoxical combination of personal humility plus professional will. So personal humility plus professional will. And at DLP, we have now 9 core values. And if I was talking to you a month or two ago, I would have told you we had 8 core values, which is what we've had for the last many years, has been 8 core values. And we held off adding another core value because in my mind, I thought we can't have more than 8 core values. It's already so many. And I wasn't willing to give up any core values that we had. And we had every year, often twice a year, we've had this discussion with our senior executive team and weren't willing to remove any of our core values. And finally, I made the final executive decision to say we can have 9 core values and we're going to add a 9th, and it'll still look good in our marketing and still won't be too many. So the one we added was humble confidence. And we've been debating adding humble confidence for many years because really we believe at DLP that is such a critical core value. I would argue it's one of our 4 most important core values here at DLP, even though it's our newest core value. And our definition of humble confidence is we exude confidence without arrogance, projecting humility and warmth to empower others and emphasize collaboration. And our leaders here, although they're very talented and confident in what they do, they're humble. They have humility. Their goal of growth and improvement is for the cause of the organization, not for their own individual gain and recognition. And Jim Collins recorded, this was a speech at, I can't remember which college it was, but a speech he delivered at a ceremony describing the level 5 leadership. And it's about a 1.5-minute video I'm going to play here quickly, which does a really amazing job of describing what really level 5 or elite world-class leadership, as we call it, is all about. So I'm going to go ahead and play this.
That the X factor of truly great leadership is humility. Humility combined with a ferocious will for something bigger than yourself. Humility in a very special way. I want to be very clear. These people are ambitious. They have tremendous energy. They are often exhausting. They never want to stop. They're utterly relentless. Okay, they have all that. But here's the difference. See, for a 5 versus a 4. So for a 4, all that energy and ambition and drive is about them. It's about what they get. It's about how they look. It's about what they make. It's about what accrues to them. It's about whether they are the center. That's a 4. 5s, all that same level of energy and drive and ambition is channeled outward into a cause, into a company, into a culture, into a quest, into something that is bigger and more enduring than they are. Level 5s lead in a spirit of service, and they subsume themselves and sacrifice for that.
So short video, but does an amazing job of really describing what elite world class or level 5 leadership is all about. At DLP, we have a mantra. We say leaders made here. And we say we focus on building a culture of leadership. And the ongoing commitments to a leadership culture there's 5 of them. And they're to define it, which is define what leadership is, which we started off talking about how we've defined leadership. Teach it, ensure everyone knows our leadership point of view, and leaders have the skills required to see. We lead and train on leadership every month. In fact, this webinar we're all on right now will become an internal training within DLP. We practice it. We create opportunities for leaders and emerging leaders to lead. We provide them with stretch assignments to prove and improve leaders. We do this to help develop leaders from frontline high potential individuals. We measure it. We track progress on leadership development efforts, helping people develop and grow as leaders, and then we model it. We walk the talk and lead by example. People always watch the leader. There's a great saying, people learn, catch more, knowledge than they're taught. Meaning, you get more in terms of just paying attention to what's going on around you and watching the leaders in the organization than you're ever going to have specifically taught. So, everybody in the organization, including myself, do everything that we tell our people to do. There's not anything that we would ask one of our team members to do or tell them they need to do that we're not actually doing ourselves. So we model the commitment to leadership that we expect from our team members. There's 7 factors that influence your influence your ability to influence, your ability to lead. And the first is character, which is who they are. True leadership always begins with the inner person. It starts with the character of the individual. The second is relationships, who they know. So influence, as I said earlier, is a one-to-one relationship. So you have to build relationships and understand who they are. Knowledge, what they know. People, the great saying is, people will never care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's why first it's about building relationships, and then certainly you have to be knowledgeable and understand what you're talking about. Fourth is intuition, what they feel. Leaders seek to recognize and influence intangibles such as energy, morale, timing, and momentum. Experience, where they've been. The greater challenges that you faced as a leader in the past, the more likely followers are going to give you a chance in the present. And I saw some questions pop up and some hand raises in Zoom. I'm going to open up to questions in just a couple minutes, and I'll tackle all questions, so feel free to type those in the chat box. Past success, what they've done. Every time I extend myself, took a risk and succeeded, followers had another reason to trust my leadership ability and to listen to what I have to say. And then ability, what they can do. The bottom line for followers is what a leader is capable of. They want to know whether the person can lead them to victory. So those are how to create influence, which influences leadership. And at the center, as I said, of leadership, the first item I just covered is character, who you are. And building your organization with people with great character is the center of being able to develop leadership. If you fill your organization with people who are incredibly talented and skilled and knowledgeable and have a great background, but they lack character, they lack honesty, they lack integrity, they lack honor, they lack fortitude, they lack humble confidence, you're going to have a hard time developing leadership, developing an organization, and having any sustainable level of success. So last couple items I'm going to touch on, I'm going to open up here to questions, are the 3 E's of leadership development. The first is environment. And this is actually where the quote I mentioned earlier, leadership is more caught than taught. People accustom themselves to their environment, take clues from their surrounding. Each organization is permeated by an invisible culture which communicates an unspoken message that shapes its people. The second is equipping. Equipping begins with expectations. Namely, again, leadership is influence. Leadership can be learned, and leaders can multiply their influence by equipping others. Equipping succeeds with training. Telling is not teaching, and listening is not learning. We learn to do by doing. Training must be interactive. So we train every single month specific on the topic of leadership alone. Equipping continues with teaching. The reward of a teacher is a changed life. Success comes through achievement, but significant results come from helping others grow. And then the equipping process can be broken down into 5 steps. Saying it, explaining the task, showing it, demonstrating how to complete the task, assigning it, letting the other person attempt the task, studying it, observing how the person performs the task, and then assess it to provide feedback on the performance of the task. It takes a lot of commitment to go through that step. It's much easier just to tell somebody what to do, just to say it and expect them to do it. But that's how you develop followers, not leaders. And the third E of leadership development is exposure. A little exposure trumps a lot of theory. To develop leaders, expose your people to expert practitioners. Provide them to world-class educators who can help them lead. It's why at DLP, we read books on leadership every month. We expose our team members, individuals, to going to conferences and events and reading great books and studying John Maxwell and Jim Collins and all these great leadership gurus that are out there, so they can learn through exposure and being around great leaders external to the organization and certainly internal to the organization. And the last thing I'm going to cover here are a list that I've developed over listening to hundreds of books on leadership. As mentioned earlier, I've developed into what I think are the 16 skills that are the key drivers behind great leadership. And I've developed and tweaked this list over the years. And I encourage, if you're listening to this, certainly you may be listening to this right now thinking, or maybe you came into this webinar thinking you wanted to make sure, hey, DLP has good leadership and is going to be in good shape, and it's not just Don, and want to understand how they develop their leaders. Maybe just looking at it from, in protecting or maximizing your investment with DLP. But hopefully, as you've been listening to this training here, you've been looking at it, whether you run a business today or a leader in a business, or you're just a leader in your household. If you're the main breadwinner in your family, or the patriarch or patriarch of your family, or you're a leader within some organization, whether that be your faith-based organization, a nonprofit organization. Everybody, I guarantee, listening to this webinar right now is a leader in some capacity, and probably in multiple capacities. And hopefully this has given you some insights on leadership that you can apply to your world. And what I'd encourage you to do is the same thing I encourage everybody at DLP to do. When you look at this list of 16 leadership skills, is look at the list and determine, which of these skills, pick one or two of these skills that you're really going to focus on here over the next few months to really improve upon. You're not going to be able to improve upon all 16 of these at the same time, but choose a couple that you could really, really focus on and become a greater leader by being consciously focused on improving this area of leadership. So the 16, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but the 16 are influence, self-awareness, discipline, accountability, what we call seeking knowledge, which is, focusing on learning and being curious. We call driven for greatness, innovation, communication. And I break that into a few different areas that you could focus on becoming a better communicator. Storytelling. People love to hear stories. Focus on being a better storyteller. People will follow you better if they enjoy listening, which telling stories helps tremendously with that. Becoming a better public speaker. I've had many of my DLP leaders and developing leaders read a great book called Speak Like Churchill and Stand Like Lincoln. Great book on becoming a more present speaker. A lot of people think, I'm not good at public speaking. I'm not good in front of people. You can develop that. And then simply being good at speaking clearly and directly. I often feel a lot of people, as they become more advanced in organization, they fill themselves with MBA talk, and they say, they ever hear the saying, if I had more time, I would have wrote a shorter letter. They take 500 words to say something they could have more clearly said in 10 words, and they try to sometimes make themselves sound more intelligent by speaking in large words and eloquent language versus just speaking very clearly and directly. Again, the job of a leader is to make things easy. Don't make it hard to understand what you're trying to say and what your directions are. 8 is decision-making, ability to improve your critical thinking skills and improve your ability to clear issues and solve problems, as we call it. Improve your ability to inspire and motivate. A lot of that just comes down to having high levels of energy and excitement to what you're doing, what you're talking about. And that's a conscious effort to display that energy and excitement. I know some people are introverts, and they are very excited and energetic and engaged, but they don't show it outwardly. And it takes some focus, intentional effort to show that energy so people around you feel the energy and know you really care about what you're talking about. 10 is coaching. Become a better coach. Coaching is about listening, and listening for the purpose of learning, not for the purpose of responding. It's a big difference in skill of listening. 11, relationship building, which the components of relationship building are promise keeping, doing what you say you're going to do. Aggressive listening, which comes back to what I just said of, listening for the purpose of learning, not for the purpose of responding, meaning you're listening to try to learn and figure out how you can help, not to just be ready to give your response or your counter. being consistently compassionate, showing you care about people as a whole person, not just what they can do for you, being truth-telling, candor, and alignment, which is making sure you're aligned with the people that are most important to you and are on the same page. 12 is deep business and technical knowledge. People follow people who know what they're talking about, as we talked about earlier. 13 is execution. Is one of the, I think, level 3 we described. People follow people who have a track record of getting things done. Execution is getting things done. That's our definition of execution. If you can't consistently get things done directly through your team, people are going to have a hard time continuing to follow you. When they follow you and you come up short every time, if you can't get the basket in the hoop ever, people are going to stop following you. Change management, might be a new word for some people listening here, but change management comes to the concept that people aren't afraid of change. They're afraid of not being prepared for change, and improving your skill of being able to prepare for change, because we're all going through change every day, and helping your team embrace that. You're building the skill of empathy. And then lastly is our new core value, building your humble confidence, being both confident in what you can do, what you bring to the table, to the ideas and your ability to execute, but doing so where it's not, people don't feel it's about you, and that you're not cocky or full of yourself. So with that said, that's all the content I have here on leadership today. I could certainly chat with you here for hours on the topic of leadership. It's something I'm extremely passionate about, and love to help anybody here, whether it's just better understanding us as a leader or developing yourself or team members, your organization as leaders. More than willing to help and provide resources and insights. With that said, though, I'm going to open the mic up to Kyle to ask questions verbally that come through the chat box. So again, you can type in questions in Zoom chat, or also if you're on social media and in whatever social media feed you're in. And Kyle will go ahead and ask those questions to me.
All right, great. So we do have 3 questions so far, but feel free, everyone, to ask more as these are asked of Don. We have one here from Kate. It says, not everyone is going to be a great leader. Even some people don't want that role. How do you manage that type of personality at DLP and help them fit in?
Yeah, great question. And I think, a lot of people think they're not going to become a great leader because they're not willing to commit to it. So I believe that becoming a good leader, to start with a good leader, it's a choice. It's a commitment. You don't get to choose if you're going to lead. Everybody leads, whether you recognize it or not. You are leading in some capacity, but not all leadership is good leadership. And a lot of leadership, especially when there's not intention and effort behind it, can be bad leadership. And there's a lot of bad leadership out there. But choosing to be a good leader is a choice. If you choose to improve as a leader, you will improve as a leader. So getting people within DLP to be wanting and willing to lead starts with doing things, frankly, like this. It's constantly talking about leadership. There's rarely a meeting that goes by where we're not talking about leadership, talking about the culture of leadership, our mantra of leaders made here, focusing on helping our team members develop a development plan and understand where they want to go. And understanding that growing as a leader doesn't necessarily mean that you're growing and having a ton of people follow you and you're the center of attention and you're leading presentations, but understanding that you are a leader in some way, shape, or form. If you're great in your role, if you're the best in the organization at what you do, you're a leader in that area. So it starts in terms of how we do that at DLP is hiring the right people, and hiring people who want to develop and grow and become better. But people who don't want to develop their ability to lead are very seldom going to be people at DLP who are people who want to develop in any area of their career, and are very seldom people who are hired here, or people, if they are hired, and stay here.
Awesome. We have one here from Chris. It says, how do you typically handle a situation where you bring someone in as a leader of a department as an outside hire, but they aren't working out in that role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And developing or hiring leaders from the outside is tricky. And our preference, and most organizations' preference, I believe, is and should be to develop leaders from within. But sometimes, especially if you're in an organization like DLP that's growing at an incredibly rapid pace, sometimes it's not possible to develop leaders fast enough to keep up with the growth. So it forces us to bring leaders from the outside. So the first comment I'd say is, we spend tremendous amount of time trying to make sure we're identifying the right leaders before we hire them. So to give an example, when we hire, especially someone in a leadership role, before somebody even interviews with us, they complete a self-interview, called a video interview of themselves. They fill out behavioral assessment reports. They fill out cognitive assessment report. They answer a bunch of questions. They do all that before they even have a first live interview. Then they have a live interview. And if that interview goes well, then they go into a panel interview with a group of leaders asking very specific, detailed interview questions, many of which revolve around leadership. If that goes well, then they have a on-site, we call full top grading interview, which is often a half-day long, grueling interview to really get to know them as a person. And then often there's then components of working with the team for a day or a few days before they're hired to really, be in the field with that team member as well. So we do a lot of things to make sure we're investing before we make a hire. And one of the tests that I do in terms of hiring a leader is even though, we have multiple offices and I don't work sit in a desk next to every person in the organization every day, I try to ask myself that, or evaluate that as the test on every person we hire. Would I be willing and wanting to sit next to this person for 40 or 50 hours every week for the rest of my life? And if my answer is no to that question, it's probably not a person we want to hire. But then if somebody's not working out, we hire them, we do all that, we hire them, they're not the right leader, the right cultural fit, they're not performing. We provide that feedback to them very clearly, very quickly. We do what we call alignment meetings to vet it out. And if they can't work out, we invite them to resign and to find the right fit for them. So we've gotten very good at minimizing that probability, but it does happen from time to time.
Great. We have one here from Mark. It says, what steps did you take at the initial stages of DLP to keep leadership at the forefront?
Yeah, I would say, the very, very beginning, leadership at the forefront was me leading and building followers at the very beginning. And, a couple years in is when we really started realizing I need to develop leaders in the organization, not just, highly productive followers. And the first thing I did, and in turn, really what we did through the organization is we started reading and studying, great leadership gurus like John Maxwell. So when we started a group we run at DLP called Driven for Greatness, probably about 9-10 years ago now, the first book we read was a John Maxwell book. And we got every person in the organization who was in any capacity of a leadership role, even if they didn't have anybody reporting to them, reading that book and understanding the concept of leadership and meeting and training and discussing it in detail and helping people understand the importance of leadership. So constant teaching, training, discussion, having it at the forefront of every discussion and decision involved in strategy and operations and every area within DLP has made it an enormous part of our culture. We say we have two cultures at DLP. We have a culture of execution and we have a culture of leadership. And, definition or the job of a leader is to make things easy so a team can execute. So, our culture of leadership and our culture of execution are tied hand in hand together. And that really is what DLP is all about, is leadership and execution.
All right, we have one here from Christian. It says, you mentioned some books, but is there a single book above all others on leadership that you would recommend?
I would recommend the 5 Levels of Leadership above all other books. To me, that is the very best book on leadership, for sure. There's many others, and I could gladly send out a lengthy list to anybody who'd like of great leadership books. I'll give a couple other recommendations now as well. Another great one is another John Maxwell book I mentioned earlier called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Another one is a recent one we just read by Brene Brown. It's a new book that just came out recently. I'm pulling up the name of that book right now, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. The Coaching Habit by Michael Steiner is another really great one on the concept of coaching. And I will go ahead right now, actually, and I'm going to drop into the chat box a list of the 16 best books on leadership that I've read, and I can gladly email this out to anybody as well, but I just dropped them into the chat box. These are my top 16 books on leadership that I've ever read.
All right, we have just one more here that I see, and it says, Don, are there any management strategies that you employ to help your team prepare for changes, especially in times of market uncertainty? And that one's from Dan.
Yeah, great question. So I'd say first is, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to change management, people are not afraid of change. They're afraid of not being prepared to change. And you look at any aspect of life, this certainly applies to business, but applies to all aspects of life. People are not afraid of the change itself. They're afraid of that they won't be prepared and won't be able to handle it and don't know what it's going to bring and what it's going to look like and so forth. So it starts with preparing people for change. So, so example, to the market downturn concern, we've been talking about the recession coming here at DLP for about 2 years now, and explaining what that's going to do to us and what the challenges that's going to bring, and talking about preparing ourselves for that now and how we need to make decisions now and building our foundation. And that's actually what led to us developing the PPP, productivity per person measurement. So, making sure that you're not just dropping on people. I'm incredibly driven to constantly want to improve. I'm never, ever satisfied with how we're doing anywhere. And so I'm constantly wanting to improve. So I'm constantly wanting to implement new ways to do things, new tools, new systems, new concepts, new technologies all the time. And I've really focused on the last 2 or 3 years, specifically I'd say the last 2 years, on slowing down my push to put things in place and making sure before we make any change that we're spending lots of time prepping people. This change is coming. This is what it's going to look like. This is why we're doing it. This is how it's going to affect you. This is when we're going to do it, giving reminders when it's coming, giving them trainings, giving them communication so they can feel prepared and ready when change comes, and accepting the fact that people are going to be nervous about not being prepared for change, and also understanding that most people like to hear and need to hear the same message again and again and again and again and again and again and again. There's a lot of studies that people don't actually fully absorb or comprehend things until they hear it the 7th, 8th, 9th time. Early in my days of being a leader, I used to think, hey, if I tell everybody something one time, they don't want to hear me say it again. I don't really want to repeat it again. So I would think, hey, I tell everybody something one time and they're going to get it. They're going to put it in action, and I've realized the hard way initially that most people need to hear the message multiple times to fully understand it. And I need to give them lots of lead time before we actually implement the change so they can get ready and be prepared and don't feel caught off guard. So that ends up us making less changes, but making bigger, more strategic shifts, and making it clear to understand how we're going to go from what we're doing now to what we're going to be doing, and understanding what that's going to look like to get from here to there.
All right, we did have one more question come in, and everyone, if you have questions after the webinar, please feel free to reach out, webinars@dreamliveprosper.com, and we'll get any of your questions answered. This one comes from Matt. It says, Don, who are a few of the leaders from outside DLP that you surround yourself with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say in terms of the top minds on leadership that I associate myself with, actually the most information kind of that I've gathered actually comes from the truly greats who come per se before us. So I mentioned earlier, Jim Collins to me is the greatest mind in business out there, and I follow him intently. Guys like Vern Harnish is another great one. Certainly guys like John Maxwell, Stephen A. Covey, now his son Sean Covey, are guys that I really look to and follow. Guys like Chet Holmes, who's no longer with us. Those are some of the great business leaders that I look to and follow and learn from. But then in terms of on a personal level, I believe whatever business you're in, whatever industry you're in, is associating yourself with the individuals running, the very best businesses in that sector, in that industry, are the people I want to surround myself with. So I do that by, doing business and building relationships with the top, CEOs and leaders of top organizations. And some of the ways we do that, we run a group at DLP called the DLP Elite Real Estate Partners. We run these events called the DLP Elite Real Estate Partners Mastermind and Workshops. And we fly, we'll bring in 20, 30, 40. The group keeps growing. Top operators, top real estate operators from around the country who come spend, 3 days with us, focusing on masterminding and learning and improving and growing and building relationships. We're doing our next one in St. Augustine in a couple months. I'm a part of a group called Tiger 21, which is a group of about 720 really unbelievably incredible people from around the world, mainly around the country, who've grown and led, and many still lead, some of the largest and most successful organizations in the world. And I meet with them every single month, sometimes a few times a month, and spend a full day with them. I'm part of an organization called YPO, which is Young Professionals Organization, which is all CEOs and presidents of companies doing over, I think it's over 12 million a year in revenue, and meet on forum basis and meet out at industry events and educational events and things like that. So those are some of the things I do to focus on being around the very best and learning from other great leaders.
Awesome. That's all the questions I have.
Great. Well, appreciate everybody's time here, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day. A reminder: take one or two of those leadership skills and focus on improving it, and you'll get tremendous dividends off of this last hour you spent with us here today. So thanks, everybody.